Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Dr. Travis Perry, your host. Today, we have a fantastic guest, Carol Chiarito. Carol has a husband, 5 children, and 11 grandkids. She started the financial industry in 2004, where she focused on pension planning. And after her mother came to live with her, she started to focus more on the need for senior planning. She moved from helping those to retire to keeping that retirement. She started the Love of Senior, a nonprofit where aging meets awesome, where she helps those in that phase of the game. She's so passionate about financial help that she also started a podcast called Jubal Age, which is an amazing resource for those who are wanting to learn more about this aspect and financial planning. And I'll also be a guest on there later this year, and authored a book that's called It's as Simple as Where You Live. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I always like to let my guests tell their story. You left us hanging there with, hey, your mom came to visit and you moved from planning with pensions to planning for, senior care. Tell us about, that story and how that affected you and how that helped you to now kind of turn your attention to help us all help our parents.
Okay, I'd love to. My background originally, college and all that, was in education. So I guess I've always been kind of on the teaching side of things. And in my career as a financial advisor, as you said, my my 80% of my business clients were in the Colorado State Pension Plan, and I taught them how to maximize their pensions and when to retire and how to retire, and getting them to it and through it was my motto that we did, right? So then um, probably about 10 to 12 years in my career, my mom, who still lived in our little hometown, um, Ray, Colorado, she calls me and she goes, I'm thinking about moving to where you are. She's 80 years old. And I'm like, really? Okay. So, my brothers freaked out because at the end of the day, she decided to move to where I live. And I had helped her with her finances, prior to her moving here. But then I think there was some kind of an instinct that she had, that she knew she her memory was declining, and she knew she wasn't going to be able to do some of the things that she had always done on her own. She knew that. I didn't know that. My brothers didn't know that at the time. And looking back, hindsight is 2020. I can see that's exactly what she did. She was already planning for what she knew was going to happen, but she wasn't bothering to share that with any of us in the family. So as she came, she lived in a little townhouse for a little while, and then she said, I think I want to go look at assisted livings because I want someone to be there. So we started looking at where she could live. Well, at that time I didn't even know there was a difference between assisted living and independent living. She didn't need assisted living. She didn't need assistance, period. She just wanted the conversations of other people besides, Vanna White at watching Wheel of Fortune every day and Jeopardy. That was her entertainment. Or I was her entertainment, right? Taking her to Kohl's or whatever we did on the weekends. So we started looking at the independent living options, and she moved in, and then we started thinking about, okay, how what would happen if you really needed to go to the assisted living? How would that begin to work? And I began to take a whole different look at the planning to help her plan for her future. She didn't have dementia at that time. It wasn't even an issue, but because she was so in tune to herself, she was the one asking me the questions of, do you think I'll have enough money for this and that? And as a financial advisor, I had sold a lot of long-term care policies, right? That's what we're trained to do. Sell this, sell that, sell this, sell that. And if you ever need this, you've got this long-term care policy. If you ever need this life insurance policy, we've got it. But the time that I was working with my mother is when it really started to sink in. What it was I had been doing all of these years as an advisor was coming to reality in front of my eyes. And I was so fortunate that my mother was such a forward thinker in the things that she talked to us about. And it wasn't until she did start to have some decline in her memory, and my brothers started questioning what kind of care she should receive and should she move somewhere else, so all those different things. And so that's when I began to, well, first of all, we had the family squabble, right? Of
Yeah,
every
families never do that, by the way. They
right.
never, they
They
never
never
argue.
they never do. So, but that's where it starts a lot of
Yeah,
times, the
sure.
family squabble. So I decided, well, first of all, I'm your daughter. Second of all, I'm also your financial advisor. So I played the financial advisor card in the whole situation. And I called my brothers and their wives to my house for a family meeting. And in my book, I refer to it as the kitchen table talk. Remember when you were a kid and your parents called you to the kitchen table and you're like, oh, girl, what did I do? Well, I'm in trouble. They found out, whatever. So I call that in my book the kitchen table talk. And we sat everyone down and, I tell the story in my book about how it was it was scary for me. And I was sweating. I had one brother who and his wife who they were very upset with me and what we were doing. So, but here's the thing, they none of them were prepared to be caregivers for my mom. And neither was I, quite honestly. I had a career, I had a family. What would I do? Would I just quit my career and bring mom home, or how would this work? So, we had the kitchen table talk and we said to mom, "What is it that you want?" And here is this 80, maybe I don't know how old she was at this time, 84, 85-year-old woman who does not want to hurt any of her children, right? Because even though I was probably her favorite,
Of course, of course.
I don't think I really was. But anyway, she was not going to hurt anyone's feelings. But somehow we got it out of her. What do you want, mom? If you're not able to make these decisions, or you're not able to take care of yourself, what do you want? Do you want to move closer to the boys? Because my brothers all lived at that time within like about a 10 to 15-mile radius of one another. And I live about 3 hours away from them. And she finally worked up the nerve through a lot of tears and coaxing to say, I want to live here. I don't want to live with any of you. I want to live in a community with my friends, this assisted living, whatever it would be. And what that did is that took all that squabbling about what I was doing for mom and my decisions for mom, that took that off the table. And now it became what mom wanted. And all we were doing, we were acting on her behalf to give her what she wanted. And that totally changed the tone of everything that we did from that point forward, for the most part. There was still a little bit of, well, are you sure we should do that? Luckily, one of my brothers is a physician's assistant, so he's got a huge medical background, and he was the guy who I could call and go, what do I do now? So, but we survived all of that. But the point of it was, I don't know what we would have done. And I see it all the time now as I consult with other families. They don't know where to turn because they've waited until something bad has happened, until mom had a stroke, or until dad couldn't, you know, do whatever he needed to do. Or if mom and dad are still alive and living together in the same house, and they lie to their kids. I'm telling you, they hide the facts that maybe they can't remember things. They hide
Right.
the fact
They
that,
sure do. And then
that
it's
mom left.
sometimes too late, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And so we as kids are not paying attention to those things, right? We go home and we see our families and we see our parents as who they were when we still were living at home. We don't really see that aging unless you live with someone. You don't see that day to day to day decline or that forgetfulness or whatever. You might go home at Christmas and go, oh my gosh, mom told me that same story 6 times. And then it begins to sink in. So, my whole mission with Love a Senior Company as well as Jubilage is to try to get not only seniors, but their children at whatever age. It doesn't matter if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. And if your parents are still alive, you need to be paying attention and you need to
Yeah.
be planning not only for them, but for yourself.
Yeah.
My husband owns his own business. I own my own business. And if you own your own business, to take time out of that business to go be a caregiver is not really in the equation. How would
Mm.
that even happen?
Yeah. So let's
Unless,
talk about that. Let's talk about that. For business owners who are listening to this, you're going, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not happening. It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to my family. Like, what are the percentages of this actually happening to individuals, period? And then how does this negatively impact business owners who are we're busy as it is, trying to, take care of our own business and our family? Let's talk to that.
well, there's two sides of it. There's the senior side. 80, I think it's 87% of seniors are going to need some type of long-term care assistance.
Mm.
So you can pay for that. You can try to do it yourself. Are your parents in a situation to pay for that? And if they're not, is that going to come from your bottom line? Are you going to help pay for the care for your mom? Are you going to move mom to your house and maybe pay for it there? What are the situations? But whatever it is, it's going to add another stress point to your day to day life. And or your wife or both of you. It's another thing. And as a senior, we don't want to be a burden on our children, but sometimes it's not a choice. And so the children, business owners, if that's who you are and you're thinking about this, just imagine right this moment if your mom or dad called you and said, your mom just had a stroke, son, and we need your help. Just picture that happening to you right now in the middle of your business day, whatever it is you're doing, you received that call. What would you do? And then what's going to happen after that? Or maybe mom and dad aren't to get, they're maybe you only have mom and dad's already passed away, or if mom has a stroke and she doesn't even have dad there to help her. Think of that scenario. So picture it on your own. It would be time away from your business. It would definitely affect your bottom line no matter what, especially if you had to help pay for some type of care, whatever your situation might be. But if you're thinking about it before the stroke happens or before the dementia sets in, and you've put those plans in place about, hey, if this happens, we know we got this covered. We all buy insurance for if our business starts on fire, right? Or we have liability for our insurance in case of one of our employees goes rogue and does something crazy. So why are we not doing that for our lives? And like I said, if your parents were lucky enough to buy one of those crazy long-term care policies that were so awesome back in the day, they're still around. But if your parents do have that, do you know? Have your parents shared that with you? What do you think your parents have done to prepare themselves? And there's the conversation. There's the kitchen table talk.
Right. Yeah. And so many of those policies were, the golden age, we're affordable. They're not so much affordable anymore. Um, What has changed in that realm? What good news is there for business owners who are like, yeah, there's no way we could house mom, or even if they did want to house mom or dad and they needed the financial wherewithal so it doesn't drain their pocketbook, what options are there now? We were talking, pre about some riders on life insurance or on annuities and other products out there. Talk to us a little bit about that. Get geeky for a moment.
So there's a couple things. I mean, um, as a business owner, there are long-term care group policies that you can get for your business. And sometimes they even allow you to add family members. So how cool is that? So
Wow.
some of the bigger carriers offer that. And so that's one option. But even if you can't add family members, what a cool thing for, as a business owner to be able to offer something like that for you and your employees. Um, there's also the annuity type planning tools that have long-term care riders. So you put a chunk of change for people who have maybe $100,000 sitting in an IRA or sitting somewhere. You could put it into this particular tool and it's got a long-term care rider that would maybe pay out if you needed long-term care instead of dying, right? It would it would pay out 200% toward long-term care. If you can get if you need help with, I think it's up to two of the activities of daily living. There are life insurance policies. Hopefully every business owner has a life insurance policy so that something happens to them, key person, whatever it might be. But some of those life insurance policies also have long-term care riders on them so that again, if something happens and you didn't die but you're incapacitated, it'll pay out either way. Now, what you can do for your parents, that's a little bit different because you can't really buy something for someone who's uninsurable at this point. And that's the problem with waiting to buy long-term care or a long-term care type product or even a life insurance product um, for that matter, because sometimes by the time you go to get it, you're uninsurable. I had a lady, one of my clients who wanted to buy it for her and her husband, and she had such bad back issues. There was nowhere I could go to get her insured for a long-term care policy.
Yeah.
Long-term care policies look at things that are going to disable you. So back issues, knee issues, dementia, remembering, all those things. Life insurance is going to look at the things that's going to kill you. So heart issues, you know what I mean? So you don't wait to the last minute to start looking at those things. You get them when you're young. I think I got my long-term care policy when I was in my 40s, and my husband still moans and groans when the bill comes in. But hey, now that we're older, he's like, "Wow, I'm really glad we got these when we did."
Well, and to speak to that, I think a lot of business owners, the responsible ones, they're in business so they can provide for their family. So that's on their mind. And if that income was to go away, they think, okay, well, there's disability, there's life insurance if premature death happened. But now that these riders are available on your long-term care policy, I mean, it sounds like it's worth just a review of like, hey, where are our insurance policies? And even if you can't or don't want to pay the long-term, like throw it on as a rider. Talk to your agent about that. It sounds like that could be a really good option. And yeah, like you mentioned, maybe even on a group policy and add some family members. That's brilliant,
Mm-hmm,
because a lot of times you can get those premiums and things as a deduction from taxes and whatnot as you're paying for a benefit for your employees.
mm-hmm,
I like these solutions a lot. And let's talk about, from the business owner aspect, let's not talk about how, couples might deal with this. Because, if we look at just, an average couple age 40, 45-ish, parents are probably still around most of the time.
mm-hmm.
And they may be in 60s or 70s, kind of getting there, but parents are still around. What would be good advice for these married couples to talk about? Like, hey, you know, there's we have four, parents who, looking at the statistics that you gave us, Carol, like not great statistics on that somebody's going to need care out of these four. How do we deal with this? Obviously, getting the whole family together on a kitchen table, that's beautiful. That's like standard, best practice. But just coming into this talking with your spouse, what do you suggest that spouses discuss, first off when they're discussing this for their own, potential parents?
Well, it's definitely a team thing. You know, just to go back to your book a little bit, your Achieving Balance book talks about the whole planning things together and putting your calendar together as with your spouse. It's the exact same idea when it comes to putting things together so that you are on the same team. And it's not, well, I'm not going to do this for your mother, or you really need to have that private conversation together so you know that you're both on the same team and you're both moving in the same direction. And if there are issues of, what would happen, uh, husband, if something happened and I needed to take care of my mom? Or I should flip that around, because what happens most is the wife is the caregiver. The female in the situation is typically the caregiver.
Yeah, it's nine
So
times out of 10, like that.
9
That
times out
exactly
of
it.
10,
And it's a
9.5, 10 times out of
Yeah,
10.
and yeah, it's crazy because I didn't realize this, kind of knew it, but didn't realize this till I got to my PhD level, family and human development classes. And it's oftentimes, speaking to your point about being the favorite, child, that it's typically the closest daughter. It's typically the closest daughter, so they're shouldering this burden. And so, yeah, like continue on, but I can see, like, as a business owner, if now that's my wife taking care of her mom, how does that now affect the entire family dynamics? Because I saw this when my great grandma came to live with my grandparents, and then those three came to live with us for a while.
Yeah,
It's kind of crazy.
right. And I mean, you know, going back to my mom's situation, my husband I'm the only daughter in the family. I have three brothers. And so I can understand the point of maybe not wanting your sons to help you to the bathroom, those kinds of things. But when it comes to having a daughter, yeah, you're going to have your daughter do those things for you. But my husband never skipped a beat in helping. And there were times, here's what would happen that I think is really interesting. My mom had macular degeneration and she had to go to the eye doctor to get the shots in the eye. And I would leave my job, I would leave my practice, go pick her up, take her to get the shot. Sometimes it was an all day event. And it was not a problem. I was in charge of my own schedule, so I could schedule my time out. I would go do that, get her home, get her all situated. Well, if something happened a couple of times where I couldn't take the time off, or I had an appointment, or I was out of town, so I would ask my husband to go do that. So here's where the business owner piece comes in, of taking that time to be able to schedule your time to go do these things. But here's what would happen: my husband would take her, go get the shot, he would take her home, he would take her to McDonald's on the way home and get her ice cream and one of those apple pie things. She thought those were the bomb. Then he would take her home and she would give him $50 cash for taking time out of his day to help her. And my husband would come home and go, I got $50, goofing around with me, because never did she ever offer me $50 for taking time out of my day. And
Right.
so if
Oh
you just
man.
kind of, I think it's funny, and we would laugh at her and, kind of joke around with her. She was very, she was not a serious kind of person. She joked around about everything about aging, which probably is why I do the things I do with the little lightheartedness. But um, the point is that generation expects the men to work, and they expect the women can just take off for whatever they need to do because they're the caregivers. So think about that if you're a female business owner. That is a whole different scenario than if you're a male business owner, in my opinion. And I'm not trying to be, sexist one way or the other. It's just the expectation. And then what if there are no girls in the family and it's all boys? And typically it's the youngest child in the family that is the helper, or the one who is looked upon if they're around in the neighborhood or the area. The
Yeah.
other side of it is, what if mom lives totally off somewhere in Florida and all the kids live around the country? What are we going to do then? Are we going to take time out of our business and fly to Florida and stay there for a few weeks? I just did a conversation consulting meeting with a client who, um, she's got three brothers, and her father lives in Pennsylvania. She had to. She's got three brothers, four brothers, a couple who live around dad, and she lives in Colorado. She had to leave her business, fly to Pennsylvania, stay there for 2 weeks to get all the stuff in order because her dad looked to her for those needs. And so she called me going, what do I do? My brothers are right there. What could we do? And so we are just retraining the family through the kitchen table talk of everyone at the table has a job. It's not just on you. It Even though you might be the favorite, Travis, you might be the favorite. What is
Yeah,
your
right.
responsibility? And what is
Yeah.
your responsibility? And what is yours?
Mhm.
So now it's a shared thing, whether it's across the country or across town. It doesn't matter. Everyone should have a role in the caregiving. And you need to prepare for this early on in your business planning because you don't know when that phone call is going to come in.
Yeah.
And I love that exercise of imagining if it came in right now. What would you do? You know where your parents live. You know the dynamics of your family. So put that in your own perspective. If that phone call came in right now, what would you do?
Right. I mean, I think that's really important as part of sitting down. And I wrote about this in my next book, Marry and Grow Rich, where it's super important to create these financial goals and to know where you're heading. But this should be part of that topic, part of the conversation of do our goals, affect us, our family, our kids, but turning that conversation and going upward and say, how does this affect our parents and those who maybe even grandparents, right? Who may need our care depending on your situation. It's been fantastic to talk about these topics. It's not something we really have delved into on this show much, just because we're typically talking about time management and growing the business, but there are things out there that we need to protect our business from. And I have seen this in others and clients and things for years as I've worked with them, and how not just the financial drain, but emotional, relational problems that can come because of lack of planning for this potential. So I appreciate you helping us focus our eye on senior care and helping our parents and grandparents out there. And what how can people follow you? How do they get a hold of your podcast, Jubal Age, and your book? Tell us where we can follow you if this is something that we want to look more into, Carol.
Absolutely. So my podcast is Jubilage, and you can learn more about it at jubilage.life. That's part of everything that I do. I do speak to organizations. I do speak to people who just want to throw a party. If you notice, my background is my 1959 little camper, little Betty. And we travel around and do presentations and party like it's 1959 events. and teach people more about what we just had the conversation of in a real fun way. So, um, my other podcast is called Senior Moments, where we highlight seniors living their best life and that whole idea of where aging meets awesome. It's aging is not like what it used to be. So, Senior Moments is the fun podcast about seniors, and Jubilage is the fun podcast with financial advisors or people who are experts in their business like you. You'll be on my podcast soon.
Soon. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time, your expertise, and the guiding light that you are to all of us who need this help at this time. And I know it's not something that we go around thinking about, but like you said, if we got that phone call and it happened today, what would we do? We prepare for so many other hypotheticals, yet this one, the stats are pretty, they don't lie on this one, and it's something that we will be involved with in
Right.
some aspect, and I appreciate you bringing this to the forefront, helping us out. Any last things, anything you want to leave us with, Carol, at the end of the podcast today?
You know, I say in Jubilage, the future belongs to the educated, and it
Mhm.
doesn't mean you've got to go to college to be educated. But listening to podcasts like this, or learning more about the ifs in life. Remember that MetLife had that motto about the ifs in life. Those are the things that can take us down. And what you're doing here with your podcast and sharing for business owners is amazing, because I think that's something that we really need to continue to educate ourselves at every stage in life, whether you're just starting out with your business or you've retired and you've moved on.
Yeah,
Education about life and all of the aspects about it is key.
it is key. I appreciate this very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for listening, everyone. Until next time, remember to live life on purpose together. And thank you again, Carol.
Thank you.